And then when I came back after maternity leave, I realized that I needed to think a bit differently about how I approach my work. I needed to become more strategic, more efficient, and really, I think, leverage the support of other people to be able to continue working at the kind of scale of projects that I was working on.
Welcome to Women Who Lead. I'm your host, Jess Carr, business leader, mother, and breadwinner in my family. Join me as I interview interesting and remarkable women from around the world on what it takes to be successful in career and life. My guest today is Lucy Sutton. Lucy is a powerhouse and dynamo. As an associate director at Bates Smart, an Australian architecture firm, she also co-founded Propelle, a networking forum for property professionals in Sydney, Australia. Working in the design and construction industry, pre-child life for Lucy would often be long hours and late nights getting those projects across the line. And she, like many of us, was thinking, how on earth would this role work post-children? Well, today she is here to share with us how having kids has in fact supercharged her career. Hey Lucy, and welcome to the show. So good to have you here today.
Hi Jess, lovely to see you again. Thanks so much for having me along.
I'm so glad that you're here with us. You, like many of us, have a really satisfying career, but you also wanted to have children. And so also like many of us, when it comes to this decision about having children or not having children and thinking about your career, you were worried that maybe by having children, you might have to put your career on hold for a couple of years. But what you actually found and what you're here to share with us today is that having children, in fact, supercharged your career. And I'm so excited to hear about this. But before we get into the juiciness, can you just give us a little bit about who you are, the type of work you do, and tell us a little bit about your family?
Yeah, sure, of course. So I'm a trained interior designer. I currently work across a whole portfolio of interior projects for commercial, residential, and mixed-use developments. And I oversee both integrated architectural and fit-out projects within the firm that I work for, Bates Smart. Over the past 6 or 7 years has seen me running some of Bates Smart's largest commercial and education fit-outs. To also gaining experience and skills in practice management, business development, as well as driving both technical and sustainability initiatives for interiors within the firm. In addition, I do run a networking group that was built by a number of women, really for the purpose of connecting and supporting industry professionals within the property industry, and that was set up prior to my first pregnancy.
So it's not just the big job role that you've got. You've actually taken on creating this extracurricular activities, which is obviously going to be benefiting you and other women in your shoes. So I mean, that's quite a lot. So we're not just talking about your career here and the decision to have children, but the career and the extracurricular commitments that you've got into.
Yeah, and look, that it comes in ebbs and flows, how much I can commit to these other aspects. But of course, career is a big one, and my probably most important job, which is raising 2 children. That's the other side of what occupies most of my time these days. So I have a 2 and a 4-year-old who I live with here in Sydney, along with my husband.
Oh, very lovely. So, and they're both preschool aged littlies, yeah?
Preschool.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Wow. I've got 3 boys, all six, 3, and 1. Oh well, I have a lot of help, and I'm definitely not backwards about that. But so what for you, because you're in Australia, and obviously I'm in Singapore, and the help that I've got live-in help, but in Australia you don't have that kind of support network. So when you were coming up to thinking about your wanting to have children and this career that you have, what did you have to think about? What was the kind of process that you went through?
So I suppose I was probably about a bit over a decade into my career when I was sort of starting to genuinely think about having children. And before I fell pregnant, or around when I fell pregnant with my first, I was, as you mentioned, working pretty hard, some long hours, running some big projects for within my company, and really enjoying the work. Found it satisfying. Was constantly learning, but I was struggling to see how it would work once the kids came along. So look, I didn't worry about it too much. I just carried on. And then I had my daughter. I took a year off for my first maternity leave. And then when I came back after maternity leave, I realized that I needed to think a bit differently about how I approach my work. I needed to become more strategic, more efficient, and really, I think, leverage the support of other people to be able to continue working at the kind of scale of projects that I was working on in that sort of fast-paced construction and design industry. And the thing that I found interesting is that shift in mindset that I went through, it was really a stepping stone to launch my career in a way that I wouldn't have expected, but it really kind of set off a lot of opportunities over the past 4.5 years since having my daughter. So, just for example, since coming back from maternity leave, I've increased my responsibilities substantially from working on one or two projects to working across a broad portfolio of projects for the company. I've definitely increased engagement with the most senior stakeholders, both internally in my organisation and externally. I've been promoted. I've become far more business and industry-wide engaged. And really the catalyst for all of this was the arrival of my first child.
You think that's a bit counterintuitive, right? So you work in an industry that does have long hours. It is project-based. It is stressful about needing to do those deliverables on time. And then you go and have your baby, which is often quite a pause period for a lot of women, and you've come back, and now not only are you coming back to work and having both of those, but you're actually talking about promotions, you're talking about increase in scale and increase in visibility and responsibility. And so I guess to somebody kind of listening that's like, oh, well hang on, what happened there? What was that pivotal change? And I think one of the questions that I have about that is, did you move from being a doer to being more of a leader, or more in a more strategic position? Or just talk a little bit about what that change was.
Yeah, sure. So look, it was a bit of a combination. So I definitely would say that I was leading projects before I went on maternity leave. So I was a leader, but I've definitely moved more into a role that is a leadership role across a variety of projects and a variety of aspects in the business now. So I would say that the main way that I've been able to manage to do that and leverage that is really by looking to my support network and my peers within the business, and really working out how to leverage the skills and expertise of others around me and form networks of colleagues to basically deliver projects together and more of them. So I'd say that's probably the first thing, is just really leveraging the support of others a lot better than I probably did previously, at which point I was probably a bit more of an independent high achiever.
Yeah. So with that, I'm always curious about how people make this kind of mindset shift or this transition. Was it something that, like, did you have a mentor that you could talk to about this, or was it just the sheer desperation of, I have to get this done and I've got a little one at home to get home to, so how can we do it?
Yeah, look, I've definitely had, particularly a couple of the senior women in my organisation at Bait Smart who have, they're a few years ahead of me and have given me amazing advice over the years. And probably a number of the things I say today are probably going to be quoting them. It definitely wasn't just, I didn't just come up with it myself entirely. But what I would say is I did have a concerted thought about sort of really shifting my approach. And the way I did that was to kind of look at my skills, look at what I was good at, what I enjoyed, what I naturally kind of gravitated towards in a project process. It's interesting when you kind of really look at if you can do anything within like this huge whole process of design, and from the conception of an idea through to the delivery and the construction and running a project on site, like where do you fit in? Where do you naturally enjoy spending your time within that process? So I think I looked at that, and then I really tried to leverage working with my strengths, and also leverage what other people valued in what I did. So this idea of this is a quote from one of my colleagues, to have a look at what it is that you are good at, which other people find hard. That was something that I definitely did take into account. I also find, that the support of others was something that just became much more prevalent in the way I worked. Once I came back from maternity leave, I really started to trust other people a lot more and let go of needing to really own a project, holistically myself, and really empower people around me and my colleagues, and also really trying to draw and leverage the expertise of other people of equivalent levels, above and below me as well, to really just produce the best results I could for work, but without taking it all on myself.
Do you think with that kind of shift, because I hear that a lot, particularly in this kind of stage of career where learning to delegate and learning to pass on ownership and pass on responsibility to others to empower them, because that's the only way that they're actually going to learn as well. I find that seems to be a bit of a common theme at this point, and it just seems to be. Do you think that personally for yourself that it's, that it shifts from being about I need to prove myself in my career to being this is what we need to get done as a team to actually get us across the line? And do you think that was part of the mindset shift as well?
Look, absolutely. Look, this is not, as obviously motherhood stuff. This is to some degree basic leadership stuff. But I think what I found interesting is it was becoming a mother that kind of was the catalyst for me to really embrace this stuff. Definitely, it's a mind shift change from, I have a piece of work that I am purely and entirely responsible for, and I want to deliver that to the best of my abilities on my own, to really, we as a business have all of these things to deliver, and how can we do the best job that we can together to deliver our clients the best results?
Yeah, absolutely.
It was interesting that was really the catalyst for me, was having the child to really push me to start going down that path a lot more meaningfully.
Yeah. Well, because otherwise it's sort of sometimes we need that discomfort to actually kind of push us into that direction.
Completely.
But what I'd like to talk about now is I'd like to talk a little bit around, having children is quite demanding from a time spent and an energy spent. It's a rather large injection into your life. So can we just talk a little bit about the type of support that you do have that does support you to be in the, full energy and engagement that you do have at work?
Yeah, sure. So I have a genuine shared care arrangement with my husband. So he also has a busy job, but we basically share 50-50 the childcare arrangements. So that's 50-50 drop-offs, pickups to childcare. And, if the kids are sick for a day, we both look at our diaries and work out who's going to stay home based on, meetings and everything else. So that's probably the first and biggest piece of support. My parents do play a role. They give us some regular and also ad hoc assistance with the children, and they're in childcare, long day care, 3 days a week as well.
And so I guess it sounds like you've got a really good setup that works for you. But I guess if people are maybe planning, or if they're thinking about how would I go about this, what were some of the conversations or some of the planning that you actually had to do? Like, did you and your husband sit down and say, okay, we're going to have a baby when they come and I go back to work? Like, did you have that conversation?
Look, he probably always made it clear from, I'd say, even before we were married, that he was keen to be actively engaged and involved with the children, which sounds great, but in terms of how that actually physically manifests, it was only really then, once my daughter came along, I'd had the maternity leave and we were talking about how's this going to work with me going back to work, that we started to fumble our way through how that actually would look day to day and week to week. So yes, there was an active involvement there, but probably what I would say the biggest thing that really shifted the dial the most for us was when he quit his job when my son was 7 months old, my second child, so that he could be a stay-at-home dad for 6 months and allow me to return to work full time.
What an incredible experience for him.
Look, it was obviously a big step. It was a big sacrifice in some ways for his career, accepting that he would be putting it on hold for that period of time. But he also really we both saw the benefits in terms of him becoming really actively engaged in the children, and it has, made a huge difference. That really I pinpoint as the time at which we really went to 50-50 in terms of our parenting after that experience, because after that, the children equally would go to him as they would to me, and it's been like that ever since. So, and then with him returning to work, we were on a much more even playing field when we were talking about how are things going to work, because he actually had a full understanding of everything to do with running a household and the mental. It's not even just the physical, who picks them up, who drops them off, but the mental load that you bear when you're running a household and caring for 2 young children.
Yeah, it's that lived experience that really is the best teacher, isn't it? So that you don't fully appreciate or understand what someone goes through. I mean, my husband's a stay-at-home dad, and has been for, we're coming up to 5 years now, and he's done that as so that I could be the one that has a career and to support the family. So, I have to say, in our family, I guess it goes a little bit the other way, that I looked after our eldest for the first 18 months as a stay-at-home mum. And during that time, I have a great appreciation. So I do understand what my husband is going through as a stay-at-home dad.
But times 3 for him, of course. So you don't really guess.
We also do have help. We live in Singapore, and we do have help. So he's got it pretty good. But it's the mental load, as you said, as well. So
yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. And so I just wanted to kind of touch a little bit, I guess, on in terms of, so that was your home life and the kinds of support that you needed to put in place to make it there. What about work? What sort of support mechanisms around both of your works, or even government support, that you've actually, had that's made a difference?
So for us, look, I mean, Australia, as you know, has some policies around requirements for people, obviously, get a year's maternity leave, and so there's a degree of financial support during that time. So look, I suppose from my experience, my company was very supportive both times when I took maternity leave, and they basically have been supportive in the sense that they've allowed me to have flexibility throughout these past 4.5 years between taking 2 maternity leaves, flexibility around my work hours, various arrangements of full-time to part-time for that period. So look, I think that's definitely been something that I appreciate, that they do really work with working parents and support them. What I think is though more interesting about some of the support that my work personally is providing and that is becoming more commonplace in policy in Australia is parental leave for partners. So we now offer, our company offers 3 months paid parental leave for the non-childbearing partner. And what I've seen that really does do is exactly like my own experience with my husband taking that chunk of time off to look after the kids, is it changes the dynamic. It means that you don't, that non-childbearing partner does take on a primary caring role during that time. And then when both partners return to work, it makes it much more of an even playing field in terms of the discussions around childcare going forward. And I guess I feel quite strongly about this because from my own lived experience, I see how important that is to creating this more equitable dynamic. And I suppose because I'm conscious that when we look at some of the challenges that women face, particularly women from a financial perspective later in life, a lot of those issues do relate back to time out of the workforce during these childbearing years. For example, in Australia, currently women retire with on average with about half the amount of superannuation that men do. Women over 55 are also the population who are the largest growing group of homelessness in Australia currently. Now, these kinds of issues, they're complex. It's to do with more than just, when they had children, but often that period of taking time out of the workforce when you have children and then as a result, unemployment, underemployment, or low wage growth for the subsequent years after can really have a huge impact on women at that later stage of life.
Yeah, absolutely. And I completely agree with you. And I mean, we could spend a whole nother session just talking specifically about this topic. I think the point that I'd like to kind of draw out of what you've just said as well is, whilst we have a legacy and a whole cohort of women that we need to help support at this point in time, I think the things that you're talking about, about men being able to come in and provide that primary caregiver, even if it is only for 3 months in the beginning, that whole lived experience shifts the whole mindset around, as you say, the 50-50 caregiving.
Absolutely.
And for me, then, what's going to happen as a result is your kids are going to grow up and their dad and their mum have equal mum and dad, who do I go to look after me, but also mum and dad mum and dad both work, and so I know that in my family, because the dynamic is flipped, that my 6-year-old's always asking, well, mummy goes to work, mummy, why do you go to work? Why can't you just stay at home like daddy? And I explained to him about how much I enjoy work. So it's interesting, how small things they are big things as well that happen in the moment. But if people are thinking, well, how could 3 months of, a paid parental leave actually make a difference? It makes a difference to the mindset, and therefore it makes a difference to the next generation and the way that they see the world that we live in and how, what is possible in that particular, in our society.
Absolutely, 100% agree, Jess. And look, I'm not saying it's not without its challenges. I can absolutely see the benefit of of splitting duties and saying, right, you're in charge of earning the money, you're in charge of looking after the children. And I think that's where, to be honest, that is where a lot of sometimes our real challenges and our difficulties come from, is that we have these competing priorities that we're both trying to manage these, pretty busy, big careers, and obviously a really big, busy, boisterous pair of children. So it can be hard.
Oh, Lucy, we just had a bit of a glitch there. You were just saying that that it's hard, juggling these big careers, and that your husband and you are having to do that kind of at the same time as raising your kids. There's just one last point that we were talking about before that I just wanted to kind of bring out more, is in the planning process. Like how much planning actually went into, we want to have kids, and how did you kind of go about that?
Look, I don't know. I wouldn't say that I planned too much, and I I say that from the perspective in a good way that I think what you want to avoid doing is sidelining your career in anticipation of having children. So we were both busy, we both have ambitions, and we kind of just carried on doing what we were doing without worrying too much about what happens once the kids come along. I mean, my husband started studying an MBA for 4 years, which went on for 4 years when our first child was a newborn. So, we've kind of just done what we do and then figured it out as we go. What I would say though, other things that I personally did to help prepare for having children, I started a networking group. That actually happened just before I fell pregnant with my first, and it was actually concerted effort to think about how to really engage and stay engaged with my industry whilst I was going to be going through this period of transition and being in and out of actual project work. And that's proved to be a really valuable source of support for the years ever since. It's interesting. I think I mentioned before, Jess, we just had an event last month, and a lot of the people there were the same people who were at that very first event over 6 years ago. So that's been really important, that source of support through means of a network. And finally, I really did try to work hard to prove my value to my employer before I went on maternity leave. I think, they have supported me through the ups and downs of everything that's happened over the last 4.5 years in my life with having 2 children. And I wanted them to do that, not because they had to, because it's the law, but rather because they saw value in me as a good employee who worked really hard for the business and wanted to aim high.
Yeah, and have that reciprocal respect and mutual trust. Absolutely.
Absolutely. It's got to be a two-way street with respect and support for employers and employees.
Yeah, absolutely. Lucy, this has been an absolutely fantastic discussion. If you had to leave us with just your 2 or 3 kind of key points, key takeaways, sound bites that you would like to leave us with, what would they be?
The first thing is probably that this whole motherhood and career thing is a journey. It's a process of trial and error, and finding the balance that is right for you and your family and your personal career aspirations is what you've got to do. There's really no right or wrong. Secondly, that the juggle is real, and accept it.
Flow with the juggle.
We are not going to do everything 110% all the time. My house is a mess constantly. That's because I choose to work hard and look after my kids. I accept that. There are things that just will fall by the wayside because you can't do it all amazingly all the time. And then the final piece of advice I would say, Jess, is what's really made a huge difference for me is surrounding myself with other people, particularly other women who are going through the same sort of stage of life, or maybe are a few years ahead, for advice and support. So many of my kind of career mum mantras come from other super mums who've come before me and who've passed down their words of wisdom onto me. And so, look, it's just amazing to know that there are other people out there who really understand what you're going through and who can provide that support. And the support that you receive from others, you then pay down the line.
Yeah, fantastic advice. Lucy, thank you so much for coming on the show today. Thank you so much for sharing your words of wisdoms around how you actually supercharged your career. You didn't have to put it on hold. And I think that this is such an important message to share because I think that there are a lot of women, younger women who are thinking, that they love their careers. They don't want to put their careers on hold. And so much of the literature tells us that we have to, that, inspiring stories like yours, real life stories, lived stories of the here and now show us that it actually is possible. So you're an inspiration. And as I said, not just the busy career, but you've got the Propelle networking events as well as raising your 2 beautiful children. And, it's really nice to kind of hear the stories of how, the involvement of your husband in that from the beginning was a key part of that. So thank you very much. And it's been so lovely to talk with you.
Thanks so much, Jess. I really appreciate your time. Thank you.
Thanks for joining us on Women Who Lead. Visit my website, jesscarr.com, to sign up for more podcasts and information on Women Who Lead. If you found value in this show, please share it with your friends and be sure to tune in for our next episode. I'm your host, Jess Carr. Bye for now.